Okay, I'd like to call to order the Village of Woodstock Board of Trustees at 7:03 on September 11th, 2018. I'd like to start with any citizens' comments that might be present. Yes. Please tell us who you are and...
My name is Roger Logan. Can I ask if there was an agenda published for this meeting beforehand?
It was published at 3 locations. It was not published online because our server went down on Friday.
Okay, can you tell me what those locations were?
The Emergency Services Building, downstairs in the entryway, and at the library.
Okay, I'd just like to suggest that to be an informed citizen and participate, it would be handy to have the agenda published. You know, there's listservs and there's other, I mean, having to find a bulletin board is a little bit cumbersome, but it's just a suggestion.
Well, our server went down, so I had no access to our agenda or posting it. So
Okay.
that was why. Normally it is posted online.
Okay.
And it will normally be on, usually it will be on a listserv.
Listserv, right.
So, points well taken, and that's why it happened. Any other citizen comments? Hearing none, let's move to additions and deletions from the public, from the posted agenda. First, V-Trans request to update sign. Phil,
Do you want to do them now? We can take them
you
now.
want to do it now or not?
Or later.
Want to do it later?
We get a lot of people here about some other things.
Okay, we can do it later. And there will also be a permit to hold a parade, which,
Yeah, standard Halloween parade.
yeah, so, is somebody here for that?
I'm not, I
If
don't
they're,
think so.
if they're not, then we'll hold that off and we'll continue on the agenda. Okay, discussion to regulate empty storefronts, dilapidated buildings. And we have,
Brian Monahan. Brian is, he doesn't look it, but he's got a fair amount of experience as an attorney, and he cut his teeth as a municipal attorney working for the League of Cities and Towns, where I started working with him. Went off in private practice, he told me 14 years ago, with a specialty in municipal law.
the interest, besides the general interest, so everyone knows, is, has to do with storefronts that have remained empty for extremely long periods of time, and one building in particular, residential, or potentially could have been partly commercial building in the village that is in horrible shape and has been left so for an extremely long period of time. And so we've asked for advice on whether we could create ordinances to improve those situations.
What works best for you folks? You want me to sit at the table?
That would be
Please,
great
yes.
if you would join us, please.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Good to meet you all. My name is Brian Monahan. Thanks for the introduction. I'll take that all as a compliment. I'm an attorney. I'm out of Burlington. Burlington may seem like the big city in Vermont, but I do a lot of work for small municipalities all over the state of Vermont. So my focus is on working for cities, towns, villages, working with communities, defending them in lawsuits, helping them to adopt legislation that they might find appropriate, such as what we're talking about here. So that's my background. I've been doing that for just about 20 years. I started with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns in Montpelier. That's where Phil and I first came to work together. And I've actually been here a couple of times. I think it's probably been 8 or 9 years since the last time I was here, so probably none of you were on this board then. But I've worked with this board a little bit over the years. So, as I understand it, we're dealing with a sticky issue in the village here, which is we've got vacant, empty storefronts, and the question is, can we figure out from a sort of legislative and local regulation perspective how, whether there's any regulatory approach that we can use to encourage that situation to change. Okay, that's I think what my charge is.
Exactly.
And what I want to do before we delve right into that is just give you folks a little bit of the background on what we're dealing with in terms of Vermont law. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about this, the rights of municipalities to regulate within your geographic boundaries. And what I want to talk about is this concept known as Dillon's Rule. It's a rule that came about in the 1850s in an Iowa case by an old judge named Dillon. And Judge Dillon really had it in for municipalities. And this was at a time when railroads were expanding across the country, and the legislative prerogative across the country was, we really want railroads to exist because it's going to enable travel for people and for commerce, and we don't want dinky little municipalities messing with commerce by rail, all right? And Judge Dillon said, municipalities are corrupt little institutions, I don't like them, and the rule from here on forth is that municipalities can only regulate to the extent that the state legislature has allowed them to regulate, all right? And that rule, that comes from Iowa, but that is the rule in a number of states, and it's especially so the rule here in the state of Vermont. We have, for better or worse, a very powerful legislature. Our legislature has the village of Woodstock and every other municipality in the state of Vermont under its thumb. So when we send our legislators to Montpelier, they have considerable authority over what the village is allowed to do in terms of adopting local regulations. And we don't have the opposite, the converse of Dillon's rule is called home rule, where municipalities are allowed to enact the regulations that they want without interference by the state. So in this case, we need a specific grant of legislative authority to do some of the things that Phil has engaged me to talk to you folks about, all right? And so we have some statutes that allow the village to do these things, but perhaps not quite as strongly as we would have liked. So that's the background. So let's talk about a little bit about what other municipalities are doing, because this issue is not unique to Woodstock. This is not the first time this has happened. Other municipalities have had to deal with this, perhaps for different reasons, for different economic and socioeconomic reasons. But what other municipalities have tried to do, and I'll focus on Burlington and St. Albans because those I think are the ones that have done it most effectively. They've adopted vacant buildings ordinances. And those ordinances have generally been calibrated to find ways to deal with vacant buildings that cause the property owner to have to deal with a degree of regulation that causes them to say, gee, I don't want to deal with this kind of regulation. Perhaps I should get out of dealing with the municipality and find ways to lease this property out to a paying tenant, all right? But the mechanism that St. Albans and Burlington have used is to require that vacant property owners register their properties with the municipality. So those municipalities have had to create this sort of regulatory structure where they, number one, adopt an ordinance that says you have to register your vacant building with the municipality, and they've hired somebody or they've used somebody who's already on staff to be the point person to regulate those things and to require the building owners, specifically owners of vacant buildings, to come in to register and to go through a regulatory process to register their building. And so I have given you folks a memo.
Right.
And some of the stuff that's required in there, if you look at page 3, is simply requiring that the vacant building be registered. So that's a regulatory hurdle that I think just at the outset causes a property owner to say, I don't want to deal with this. Perhaps the building should not be vacant. And if I can avoid going through this regulatory process, I will, and I'm going to find a way to lease this property out to a paying tenant.
Brian, could I interrupt just to clarify something?
Yeah.
When you say a vacant building, what if the entire building is not vacant
Yeah.
and it's one section, a rentable section that is vacant?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I thought about that, and I haven't actually seen that addressed in these ordinances, but I think that the village, if it wanted to, could tackle that problem as long as you did it specifically in enacting the ordinance. So I think you could address it in a couple of ways. I think you could say if a building is 50% vacant, you have to come and register it, or if it's 40% vacant, or if more than one floor is vacant, or more than one rentable space is vacant. So I think there are ways to approach that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
What about grandfathering?
Yeah, yeah. Tell me more. What
Well,
about
let's just say that the space was vacant before we put these ordinances in place.
Right, right. So the concept of grandfathering is a zoning concept. It usually means I have a property here, and either my structure or my use, it was legal at the time it was built or began to be used, and the regulations changed, and now it's not a fully legal use. So my rights are vested, and I have a right to continue using that moving into the future so that I can continue to amortize my investment in that property. That's a zoning construct. What we're talking about here, from my perspective, is what I would call a police power regulation, which is related but different from zoning. My view is that a property owner, at least from a purely legal perspective, does not have the right to have a grandfather right in this context. I think you might want to choose that, to allow that, but I don't think you have to do that. All right. So just keeping on, and you're welcome to ask me more questions if you want. These are the other things that I've seen in these types of ordinances as components of the regulatory process. Requiring that vacant buildings be secured. I think that's a primary focus of municipalities, is promoting public health, safety, and welfare. And we want to ensure that for people who may be in the buildings, for whatever reason, the building is going to be secure, and it's going to be safe, and it's not going to fall to the ground. And I know Woodstock just had a fire, a catastrophic fire. I don't think anybody was hurt, but you know, that is a situation where we want to ensure that that the structure, whatever structure is standing, is going to be safe for people who have to go in that building, and that includes rescue and fire personnel. We want to make sure the property's as safe as it can be for them. We want people to explore whatever approaches they might have at their option for abating whatever problems they have that are preventing buildings from becoming vacant. So the regulations typically address ways to do that. And then I think one of the most important things here is a fee. Nobody likes to pay fees. Property owners don't want to pay fees. It cuts into your margin as an owner, and you know, as a business person, I can understand and respect that. Nobody wants to pay a fee. But if a building is going to be vacant, that's, I think, a necessary part of creating this sort of infrastructure that we're at least talking about conceptually here. The rates for fees that I've seen have been sort of all over the place. I've talked about it a little bit on pages 3 and 4. St. Albans, I think it's $100 a year. Burlington, it's $500 a year, but it's waivable if the property owner can demonstrate that they're marketing the property either for sale or for rent out to the public. So those are the basic things that I see get put into these things. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about enforcement and how you enforce these sorts of things. Go ahead.
For the Burlington model, do they have to demonstrate that the property is being marketed at a competitive rate?
Yeah, I think it says.
It does make that statement, but there's no definition.
Right.
So it becomes,
Tricky.
Yeah.
it says it, but it doesn't give any definitions or guidelines.
Yeah, it says a reasonable sale price, I think, or a reasonable
It's in the
price.
definitions.
Yeah. So, you know, reasonable is a word lawyers like to use. So I think it would be, you know, what is a reasonable rate in the market, either for sale or for lease, is what it's going to come back to. So, talking about enforcement, there are two tools under Vermont law that you can use to enforce an ordinance like this. The first is ticketing through the Judicial Bureau. So this is akin to your police officers issuing tickets for speeding. Very basic. The benefit of issuing a ticket is that most people in a civilized society pay their tickets because they don't want to deal with having tickets on their record. And conceivably, they could be hauled into court for contempt of court for not paying their Judicial Bureau tickets. However, the Judicial Bureau has a limited jurisdiction, and it cannot issue any injunctive relief, which means the Judicial Bureau cannot force anybody to take a building down, or make a repair to a building, or secure a building, or any of those sorts of things. So,
Or market at reasonable rates.
or market at reasonable rates, or whatever outcome you're seeking. I even wonder whether a court could force somebody to do that, because we are dealing with a free market here, and we can regulate it in some ways, but I think our abilities to regulate it are somewhat limited. So I don't know if we have the right to force somebody to market a property, unless there's been a specific court ruling. Let's come back to that, because I just want to talk about the easy stuff, which is, or at least the more straightforward stuff, which is compelling a property owner to clean up a property that is structurally unsound. That's an easier example. So if we come to an understanding that a property is structurally unsound, we could go to court, which would be the Superior Court right here in Woodstock, to get an injunction. And the process for getting an injunction is, I'm not going to say it's complicated, but it does require a little bit of effort. It requires that the village go there, typically with an attorney, and the rule that addresses injunctions in court procedure says that you have to hold a hearing, and the plaintiff has to present evidence that demonstrates that the plaintiff is entitled to an injunction. So typically that would mean going there with the village's building inspector or building officer, whatever that title is, to testify and present some evidence that the building is not adequately secured pursuant to the ordinance. So I just want to throw that out there, because I want you to understand that there is some effort required in going through that, some staff time involved, and some attorney time involved. So it's not a cheap and easy process. It would require your support, your backing, and your interest and your commitment of resources to make that happen. All right. So that's a 30,000 foot snapshot of what we're talking about. So, what are your questions besides what you've already asked?
From what you said, it sounds to me like we have two different situations we're pursuing. One
Right.
sounds more likely to be successful in us pursuing it, listening to you and reading this, which would be a building that is in disrepair and potentially dangerous to the public.
Right.
The other one sounds a lot tougher in terms of having a landlord be motivated to rent places that he's leaving unrented, that are commercial spaces.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. One of the things I didn't talk about, which Phil asked me to address, is whether the village has the authority to regulate the rents that a landlord charges. So when I thought about this, and I did a little bit of legal research on it, I analogized it to rent control. And New York City is kind of the paradigm for rent control in our country, where there's a huge stock of rent-controlled housing. And New York City has regulations that it's adopted that allows it to do that. New York City typically has the blessing of the New York legislature to adopt the regulations that it wants, and it can do that. In Vermont, to my knowledge, there's no example of rent-controlled housing. I'm just talking about residential right now. No examples of that anywhere in Vermont. And I think part of the reason is that there's no specific enabling statute in Vermont law that allows any municipality to do that. And I suspect no municipality has sought to do that to this point. But then I took it a step further, and I did a little bit of research to figure out, is it possible to regulate non-residential property rates, rentals for commercial properties? And I don't think that authority exists. I certainly don't think it exists in Vermont law. And when I look nationally, I don't think any municipality has really ever gone down that road. And I think there are significant legal hurdles to do it, and I think there are significant political hurdles to doing it. And I won't get into those unless you want me to, but I think you can all imagine what some of those hurdles might be.
I don't want to conflate the two issues, because there's really the vacant building ordinance, and part of that might be having landowner or landlords maintain their buildings because these vacant buildings are becoming unsafe. But then you haven't really talked about it yet, the authority to regulate damaged or destroyed buildings that may not be vacant.
Right.
And that has to do with a building code, enacting a
Right.
building code. So that's a separate issue. Those are two different things, right?
Very much so, yeah. In terms of adopting a building code, just to jump into that, you have clear authority under Vermont law to adopt a building code. There are not that many municipalities in Vermont that do that. I would say, I'm hazarding a guess, it's 15 or so municipalities that do that. It's typically the bigger municipalities that have the resources to do this, but there are certainly some smaller ones that do it. But it requires that you have some infrastructure set up to have a building code officer to go out there and to examine buildings, and that person has to be qualified and capable to do that.
And qualified in what way? Can they be trained, one of our existing staff members can be trained to do that, or do they have to be a dedicated staff person? Is there any?
I think one of your existing staff people could probably be trained to do that. But I think there will probably be occasions when you'd have to call in a contracted structural engineer, for example. But that's a pretty easy dragon to slay as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Tom, you have a question?
I do. My understanding is that certain municipalities, cities, have faced this problem, and ordinances and creating some of the laws to support that can be cumbersome, and so others have used the zoning office as a way to be able to leverage. Does that make any sense, sir? I forget your name. But is that a possible way to approach it without having to create, the ordinances and use the zoning office to be able still to achieve your objective?
Well, I think that's the clear
Okay.
route to take there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you could use your zoning people.
Yeah, I think Michael would be.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You would just have to adopt new regulations.
Yeah.
Hey, I have two questions. The first one is just clearly property tax laws have different brackets for residents and non-residents. Is that something that could potentially be applied to landlords as well? In regulating, for example, having different ordinances for resident landlords versus non-resident landlords.
I don't think I would recommend that to the village, to have different regulations for resident and non-resident landlords. I think property taxation is a totally different issue, unrelated to this.
And then the other question I had is, could there be some sort of, if you had a landlord with a building where 3 out of 4 units were rented, could you put some kind of tax on their existing income to incentivize them? To say, as long as there's a vacant unit in your building, you have this 1% tax of vacant unit tax.
You are my clients. I just want to be clear when I answer these questions.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I liked Patrick's question.
okay.
And that's Patrick Proctor, just for you to know that.
Thank you. Serena.
I'm happy to answer the questions as long as you folks are.
Yeah,
comfortable
no,
with that.
is that possible?
I don't think it is possible. We don't have any income tax authorities, municipalities. The property tax is the sole revenue device that we have in this context. In addition to the fees, we are allowed to enact fees.
So for the building that we're most just concerned about, that's potentially dangerous, there are stones falling onto the sidewalk. I've heard that the doors are ajar. It's in bad
Broken
shape,
windows.
but open windows. We have no authority currently to just go in, though. How do we create a situation where we can tell? Is there anything shy of an ordinance that allows us to say we need to inspect this building internally because we suspect there's a danger to the public?
Yeah, I think the other thing you can do, Phil, help me understand, there's no village health officer, it's the town health officer?
That's correct.
Okay. I think this is a conversation you could have with the town health officer to see if there's a health threat posed by that situation. And I'm familiar with that situation, I know the building. it's, I think, definitely possible for the health officer to look into this, because that, I would consider that to be a threat to public health and safety, and that is an avenue that can be pursued. The challenge there is that the health order is not always complied with. So typically, you'd have to go to court to enforce the health order and get an order of the court to say the property owner has to secure the building or something like that. And if the property owner doesn't secure the building, the municipality has the right to do that.
With court permission, I presume.
This is all with court permission.
The
That's-
court permission.
Yeah.
And an ordinance would or wouldn't be helpful in accomplishing this.
I think from the health officer perspective, I think Vermont state law is sufficient. It provides significant enabling authority to say there is an exigent health circumstance, and the health officer has issued an order to secure the building, and then the court can enforce that order.
So what, sorry, just one last question, then I'll let you ask this. So if there, for some reason we did want to pursue an ordinance, and we needed the state legislature to approve it, would that open a can of worms of what they could then say about our ordinances in general?
No, and I'm not concerned about that right now. So the state legislature can really only interfere with your governance charter. Woodstock Village has what I would call a modest governance charter. It looks like it was adopted in 1895 when the village became a village and separated from the town. It provides some regulatory authority, but we don't need that. I don't think we need that to do the stuff that I've talked about so far tonight.
Okay.
So this is just you folks.
We have the latitude to introduce these regs,
Correct.
these ordinances into our regs.
Correct. Without any involvement of the legislature.
Great, okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to be clear on a couple of things. So adopting the building codes that you were describing could be a joint approach with also passing an ordinance that looks like the Burlington vacant lot ordinance.
Correct.
And they would get its separate problems, but we could do them both.
What I liked about the St. Albans approach is you declared an unsafe building. And I talked to Robbie about him and his guys being an enforcement agent over an unsafe building.
But it sounds like that.
As opposed to having a building inspector, that gets into a lot of trouble with rental properties, having a building inspector.
But
right now, the state of Vermont does building inspections here for anything other than single-family homes. So anyway, there's things to consider as we get down the road, but there are different approaches, and it's good to have options.
Well, the other question's been, so for the ordinance and the way that Burlington and St. Albans have structured them, what is the Vermont legal community's view of how those ordinances have stood up so far? I mean, have there been any lawsuits that you know of around these new ordinances?
Yeah, good question. There has not been anything that has gone to the Vermont Supreme Court.
Okay.
So we don't have what I would consider to be law
Yeah.
on those issues.
I don't know if that's an encouraging or not encouraging.
Yeah. You never want to be the one
No.
creating law.
It'd be fine if Burlington was the one.
Yeah, and Burlington is typically the leader in these things because it has the resources to do that. I know Burlington has gotten some court orders and has been effective in getting done what it has wanted to do. But that stuff has never been appealed on to the Supreme Court. But I think property owners have generally complied.
Okay.
And I will say I've been through the health order process more than a couple of times, and we've gotten courts to approve. In those cases, the municipality has said, this problem is egregious, we want it done, we're going to do it. The municipality has paid contractors to do it, and then has, using court authority, assessed a lien against those properties. They're yet to be repaid, so it is a risk that the municipality takes. But generally, it's something you do more for the safety than for recouping the money.
Sure. I have a question.
Yeah, I think, unless I'm mistaken, there's 3 vacant storefronts in the village, on the street.
Yes.
How can you force an owner of those buildings to rent them, number one. You can't find them if you got a vacant storefront, because nobody wants to move into it. And unless the building is dilapidated, which to my knowledge none of them are, what are we gaining?
Well, this is the tougher of the two situations we've been discussing. And I think that the buildings that have been vacant have not been, are not vacant because there's not an interest in tenants. And the landlord has expressed an interest in having tenants. It's a question of what they are charging.
Right. Why is it vacant?
That's why it's vacant.
$45 plus a square foot.
You gotta sell a lot of stuff before you keep the lights on.
Yeah, so that looks like, from what we've been learning, that a tough one to, and $100 or $200 or $300, it may not change that landlord's decision on why they're keeping the rent where they're keeping it.
We know
It's
at least,
doubtful it would.
we know at least a number of them can afford to pay that as if it was nothing.
But it's really about us doing everything that we can to encourage these
Yes.
places to be rented and to give us some sort of leverage, particularly if the places are
So it may be some other form of encouragement other than in an ordinance that we need to pursue to convince these landlords that it's not in their best interest or the town of Woodstock's best interest to have these storefronts remain the way they are currently.
Right.
And the way they look, not even cleaning the windows. So.
Well, and the safety and health concerns that they then pose.
But I am concerned with, we can discuss some other forms of action that don't require you, Brian, but in terms of the building that's physically a problem and potentially, that's the one that I'm really interested in pursuing based on what I've learned from what you supplied us with. And the town health officer sounds like a good direction to go
Yeah,
in.
we'll need to get her some legal help. Probably Robbie get involved.
Yeah.
I think it would be do right the first time and get her the support she needs.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, thank you for being here.
Brian, thank you so much. The material you supplied in advance helped kind of clarify those two things. And
Thanks for making me drive.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to-
thanks for coming down.
Planning commission?
I had one other memo that I finalized today, just on the authority piece that I didn't include it in the first one, so I'll ask Carrie to just take one and pass it down.
Oh, great, thank you.
It just kind of buttressed the stuff that was in the earlier one.
Okay,
So that's it. I appreciate your time.
thank you.
I'm happy to answer future questions. if you have them.
Thank you very much.
Safe travels, good to see you
Appreciate
again.
it. Yeah, likewise. Be in touch.
I'm not sure, because we're not really talking about doing, well, if we end up doing it through zoning, for sure.
I think we should also pursue zoning. Jeffrey, what do you think? Don't you think we should also pursue zoning regulations?
I think that we should.
Yes, I think we need to meet with the planning commission.
That would be a good idea. Maybe we can get on their agenda. Sure.
Yes.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along on our agenda, we have requests for permits, use of the green. There's a addendum request for a light garden. Serena, can you?
Yes, so we plan on having live music on the green Saturday night, September 22nd. And we would like to change the hours of the music from, I think currently it's on the, what is it? I believe it's like 7 to 8 or 8:30 is what we have on the permit right now. We'd like to change that to 7:30, so 7:30 to 9:30 p.m.
I'd make a motion to approve.
I second it.
Is there any other discussion on that minor change? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
And motion carries. 7:30 to 9:30. Peak to peak, October 13th. Hi.
Yep.
Who are we speaking with?
I'm Stephanie Curieses. I'm the Chief of Interpretation and Education at Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park. And this is an event that's been going on annually for a number of years now. We usually set up a tent on the green, a couple of tables. In the past, we've occasionally had food on offer. That's not currently on the docket for this year. It's mainly a hub for people to meet, to then depart for hikes that go up Mount Peg, Mount Tom, and this year we're adding another hub at the Pogue in the park as well. So it's a fall celebration of Woodstock trails. We have a variety of hikes going out the day, and then just general information on the table out there on the green.
I move to approve as presented.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You're approved. Thank you for coming and for putting on a lovely event. Okay, we have the Veterans Day Parade, November 11th. We have
Sue and Phil Tomlin are not in town right now,
Okay.
and they asked me if I would come here tonight.
Yeah, we have some paperwork on that. Are you aware of any changes from the past?
No, in neither. The Veterans Day is a short march from the Legion to the courthouse through the green, and then a ceremony there of about 15 or 20 minutes, and then they return. And there's no, just one trumpet will play taps, not a lot of music, speeches, only talking, and then they return. And the police usually control traffic while they come and go.
I'd make a motion to approve both for the November 11th event and for the May 25th parade.
I'll make a second for that.
Okay, I'd like to know if there are any changes to the May 25th parade.
No plan changes at this point. They understand that if they make changes, if they alter the route at all, they will have to return. The parade forms near the elementary school between 10 and 10:30, and then it starts and it goes all around the village. If they do anything with the route, it would be to shorten it, and they will come and speak to you again.
Okay, clarifying that for me. Any other discussion on the motion to approve both of these parades as presented? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank
Mary,
you.
for filling in. Request for permits. We have the Woodstock Elementary School Halloween Parade. I'd like to, is there anyone presenting for that? If not, we have information that it's the same as in the past.
I make a motion to allow the Woodstock Elementary School Halloween parade.
Seconded.
Any discussion? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, use of the sidewalk. Little White Church display on the dummy, November 23rd to January 2nd. Do we have, yes?
This is a little, I don't know if you saw that in the parade or not. I do have the article from the Standard here, if anybody want to look at what it is. A little history on that. Growing up, I think I'm the only one here, maybe Michelle will remember. It used to be that church was located over, I believe it was over Faro Jewelry, on the second floor, out the window. And the electric...
Over the
Huh?
Teagles building.
Oh, I remember it over the
It was over the Teagle building. I
Over what building?
That was later.
It was over one of the others, right there. The electric company used to take care of it. The electric company had a store there, they sold appliances underneath. I think it was Wally Coffin and maybe,
It might have been before the Teagle building, maybe it was at the
There you
CVPS
go.
building. Exactly.
yeah, CVPS had
Yeah.
it, or Woodstock Electric.
That's right.
But anyway, we found the church, and it's been resurrected, been cleaned, and painted, and the windows are redone by somebody in the class of '61. And we'd like to locate it in the area of what we call the dummy, or the green there, the center of town, on a platform. And it would run from, and I said, do you want to play the music from around approximately 4 to 9 in the evening? And the music would be Christmas music, non-denominational, whatever you want to call it. Just kind of generic, Jingle Bells, Rudolph, Santa Claus, Silver Bells, that type of stuff. And it would be maintained by a group of us. In other words, snow going to be dealt with. There is a plug-in right there on the light post. And trying to bring it back to the town, and we really can't see it going over up in the window anymore. It is pretty heavy, so. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they did it before, to be honest with you.
I do know that, I mean, I'm all for some things with historical value, but I do know that when the picnic table with an umbrella was put on the dummy, it was considered quite a distraction and people didn't want it there. There's also a Christmas tree already on the dummy. Would it be possible for this, with this having historic value, be something that would be like on the Historical Society's front lawn? And I'm asking for it to be closer to my store at that point, but.
It would be out of the way. I mean, the whole purpose is to get in where the people enjoy it in the village, you know, walking back and forth.
Well, but people do walk back and
Yeah, but
forth
they don't
on
walk to the
Elm
restaurant,
Street.
go by the Historical Society.
That's where the majority of the parking is anyway.
Have you talked at all with Matt Powers, the director there,
Huh?
about? Have you talked at all with Matt Powers, the director at the historical?
I have not.
Might be.
I know Dennis hasn't either. We just thought that would be a great place to display it, you know.
Or on the green.
Or even on that grassy plot that's at the entrance to the History Center parking lot between Clover Gift Shop and Gear Trader / Encore. That's
No, we haven't, that would have to be discussed with the
the
landlord of
History
the
Center.
property.
Yeah.
So it's
This is
been
their
on
first
private
look at it.
property in the past.
Huh?
It's been on private property in the past.
This has?
Yeah.
No, it hasn't been in since the window, came out of the window.
Right.
That was private property, but
Yeah.
it was
Right.
Woodstock Electric, who were all native people of the town, and
Yeah.
put it up there to enjoy it.
I'm not hearing that the board is supporting the dummy as the best location for it. No. So you might want to consider some of the suggestions that have been made.
Well, how big is it? What's the measurement? How big is it?
It's on a trailer, it's pretty decent sized.
I think it's
It's
3
right
by
there.
5 by 7 feet tall is what the memo said that we have.
4x4, I think, 4x5.
I mean, part of my concern with that, with the dummy, is just sort of visibility, especially with a lot of snow, can get a little tough at that corner. But that was sort of my, I mean, it seems to have huge historic value, and so I would say,
It does,
yeah, finding a good spot for it. I just don't know one where it's in by so much traffic might be tough.
Well, we have all kinds
3
of,
by 5 by 7.
look at it, I mean, we can,
I see.
if you talk to some of these other people, I put it down to the Historical Society, we just will, you know, put it down to the jungle, as far as I'm concerned.
I really think you should reach out to the Historical Society about that grassy plot between
Is there a
Clover.
fence around there, though?
It is, but there's also a bench back there. People go back there all the time to sit down.
Maybe this is crazy, but what about the vacant storefronts?
We gotta get the music projected out, that'd be such a good idea.
I don't know, because it would be like safe.
The old
Maybe
railroad.
Yeah, right for where the old final shop is that porch where they put the little kids out. It would be protected from the snow, nobody would have to clean it.
If you go to a vacant storefront, you wanna go to the old Railway Express, I think. That would be the best place for it.
Which one?
The old Railway Express, well, can't remember what was in there, this is going back, you know. The little.
What building, Eldon?
Well,
Right now you're-
right adjacent to Bentley's, as you stand with your back to the pharmacy, it's that little storefront there.
What's Procopio?
Oh, where Procopio was last? the
I can't
gift
remember who was in
shop?
there last, but there's so many in and out of there.
There was a photo shop in there for a while.
But I'll take it around with Dennis and,
Well, and I think that what I'm hearing is that the dummy may not be the best place for it, but people would like the idea of having it available somewhere in the village for people to enjoy, and maybe.
we would put it away right after New Year's. We got a place to store it for the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Get it out there.
we all love the idea of having it out in the village. We've already had to take things off the dummy because of traffic and people were distracted, so.
But maybe I'll check to the guy with the Historical Society.
Yeah.
How about the Greenwood? That might be a possibility to come back with a permit for that.
absolutely, and that's on private property.
Because there is power at that little,
You'd have to ask permission basically for the sound, more than anything else, just to be broadcasting publicly, but, other than that, I don't think you need our permission to have it on private property.
okay, all right. All right, well, we'll move on.
And thank you guys for resurrecting
Thank
it.
you.
Huh?
It looks very
Thank you guys for fixing it up and
Yeah,
resurrecting
let's
it.
say it was something that I think only Michelle and I were aware of it in this room right now when we were growing up, you know.
Well, it was, I remember it above
Were you here when it-
above the bookstore.
That's where I saw it.
Yeah.
Was it like inside or
No, it was
outside?
hanging, it was hanging out off the building.
Like a portico?
It was, some
No,
kind
it
of
was
a
literally
brace or something
hanging
that
out.
held it up.
Wow.
I don't know how safe it was.
It was secured.
In some
I can't
manner.
remember, I don't know how
Nobody
they
got
were.
hurt.
Tried to find a picture of it in place, but nobody seems to come up with one yet.
Maybe Phil Camp has, can find one.
Well, the History Center might also be a good place to.
I have a picture of it.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Thank
For
you.
being here.
All right, let's move on to the police chief's report. Chief Blish?
For the Halloween parade, I'm going as a police officer.
Yeah, just to surprise people.
All right. So, so Joe Swanson's back on light duty right now, and hopefully he'll be back full duty beginning of October. Looking forward to that. We have cooperated with WISE, the Women's Information Service, who we assist us with domestic violence. We assisted them in trying to obtain a grant that's going to be able to conduct better services in our area, and as well as enhance some training for law enforcement officers. Starting in October, we're going to be doing some bullying prevention education with the first graders at Woodstock Elementary School. And also recently, over the past Labor Day holiday, we participated in the Governor's Highway Safety Campaign, which was a DUI campaign, resulted in 2 DUIs, 35 tickets, and about 45 and a half hours of additional patrol hours that Woodstock benefited from because of the grant time.
What do you mean by 35 tickets?
Issued for the campaign. So we made 2 DUI arrests, we wrote 35 tickets that were related to
That
enforcement.
were related to
Right.
being on
Speeding,
patrol?
cell phones.
Other things, oh, thank you.
Yep. We also did a checkpoint, some of you may have seen it on Labor Day itself, with the state police, ourselves, Windsor County Sheriff's Office, and the Orange County Sheriff's Office. We also had some break-ins last night. You might have seen it on Facebook, probably, I think 7 or 8 vehicles around River Street, Maple Street, Mountain Avenue. All the vehicles were unlocked. They went in looking for cash and change and jewelry. So right now, if anybody has any information or leads, we ask obviously to call us, but we also, more importantly, ask people, please lock your doors. Don't make it easy for these criminals. Obviously, it's just crimes of opportunity, really, if you make it easy for them.
They were all unlocked. There was
all the vehicles.
no windows were broken.
Correct, no forced entry in any
No
of them,
forced
it's just
entry.
people left their cars unlocked with some valuables inside, and they got taken.
Do we know if this is connected to the Heartland?
We do not know, right now we don't know.
Okay.
They all came in today.
Right.
So also Sergeant Swanson is going to be representing the police department in a panel discussion around the high rates of opiate use, and in particular among pregnant women. That's going to be on September 20th here at Town Hall. I think, who's putting it together? Charlie Kimball called us, and he's kind of going to be on that panel as well. September 20th. And then on September 25th, he's going to be representing us, the police department, at a multi-agency meeting in Windsor County, because Windsor County is considered has a high rate of opioid deaths throughout the state of Vermont. We're on the high end in Windsor County. On August 28th, Zach's Place hosted an emergency services barbecue appreciation lunch, which was attended by several officers, and we really appreciate their support. And the week of September 23rd to the 29th is Child Passenger Safety Week. So we ask if anybody has any questions about that. 2 of our dispatchers are child car seat installation techs. So if you make an appointment, you can go down there and they'll show you the proper way to install it and actually help you do it. And again, school started, so we've had an officer out at Woodstock Elementary and at the high school whenever we had the extra bodies. And so I just caution everybody, please slow down for the buses. And then last but not least, of course, is the meters. In your packet, I think an email from Mark Berling, who is a representative from IPS, sent out the email regarding the increased usage in the credit cards, which I think I had pointed out last month. And while that's good news, and in fact, our revenues over this past August for coins and credit card transactions was $15,431, which was about $2,000, or actually closer to $3,000 over what August of 2017 was. And it represents about a 35.5% usage of the credit cards. I did want to point out that we are having some issues with these meters. I mean, in essence, the repairs and the fees may not be producing as much revenue based when you take away what some of the other issues are that we're having.
And the problem there, Chief, is based on your reporting and the increase in meters going down, is that even if they're still balancing out, it's going to continue in a downward direction, and at some point it won't.
That's the
seem
trend
like
we're
it will
seeing, and that's why
balance out.
I'm just bringing it to you, because I'd be remiss if I didn't inform you what was happening with the meters, so that you can make, obviously, an informed decision. And I pointed out, the meters that we've sent back, right now, we had 12 meters that we sent back, which cost $960. I just got another invoice today, actually, for another $340 on some meters that we got back. And we've got another, I think, 24 meters boxed up, ready to go, which, if you do the math, it would be like another $2,000. But we've contacted the company to come and send us their tech. They have a tech now they're a company out of California, as you know, but they have a tech in Connecticut now. We've requested that they send him up. But I've asked Michelle to come here because Michelle deals with this day in and day out. If you don't know, Michelle Sutherland is she's the administrative secretary, but she does all
And
the
she's your
ticketing.
IT.
She's everything. She's my right hand. But anyway, so I asked her to come in and kind of just give you the lowdown, a little bit more insight in terms of what the people on the ground, the boots on the ground, so to speak, are really dealing with here in terms of the customer service we experience from the company.
So we have 24 meters. They're on my desk. They don't work. I did contact the company. They want a list of all the meters and exactly what's wrong with them. I have no idea. They do not turn on. I don't know. I don't have time to go through them all and try to figure it out. They want to troubleshoot it. I mean, they should send a tech up here, but they have no interest in that. The batteries for the meters, I have probably 50 batteries in a box that don't work. $30 a battery, that's what they want.
Those are for the external batteries.
Yes.
Do we have any estimate, have we heard anything about the life expectancy left on the internal batteries?
I don't know.
The word we got from one of the techs that came up at one point, as I recall, was that, because these are refurbished and used, so the external batteries, you can replace, but the internal batteries, once they're gone, then you have to more or less replace the entire unit. Because these were refurbished and used, we're not sure what the life expectancy of the internal battery is, other than that it's probably around the 65% to 100% range. depending on the meter.
65 to 100% life left.
Right.
Is there a parking meter service that's like a lease?
Chief, did we ever find out, did we sign a 1-year contract? Is it a 3-year contract?
I have not had an opportunity.
Do you guys remember what was done? Did we
A good business model.
It seems,
Did we say that we would do this for 1 year and then if it didn't work out, did we sign because we got the used ones at no cost? Was it a 3-year contract that we signed to keep them?
Yeah, we talked about this, and I don't.
We'll have to look it up.
Right, because that's really important, because at this point, we're realizing potentially that.
Right, I thought the only contract we had was a contract of what percent they get of what.
No,
we
we had to keep them for a certain amount of time, and I hope it's not 3 years, because if it's 1 year, we have all of our old meters.
We do.
We could maintain those things ourselves. The juice is obviously not showing that it's worth the squeeze with this system for our small village, and people don't like them anyway, except for the credit card use.
Yeah, and so just another example of some of the issues that we've got going on. Michelle pulled a report for me. So from January of this year to the 10th, yesterday? These are what do you call them, malfunction?
Exactly.
Malfunction reports that we get every day on every meter that we can print out with the software. There's 1,152 faults in this packet
meters.
on 167 potential meters
Over what time period?
for the last 9 months, since January.
And they also increase when we get into the winter months.
And we've sent back, 118 boxes of, which is about 109 meters
Right.
since January 1st. So the trend is that it's, you may not be, and then when you factor in my opinion, when you factor in the fees that we pay to the company every month for the modem fee, the transaction fees, it ranges between $1,000 and $1,300 a month. And then if you factor in, we're paying however much a month to send back these meters for repair, like you said, it may not be coming out as far ahead as the effort that we're putting into it is making it worth it. Because then when you have vacant meter heads because you have so many faults and we only have so many spares, you're losing revenue. And then you have Terry and Harold are chasing their tails trying to keep up these things working. And when they don't work, we get nasty letters. Why aren't the meters working? I mean, we get these all the time, and Michelle gets phone calls all the time. People are mad because they're not working.
To be honest, out-of-towners don't care about the ticket $10. Out-of-towners don't care about paying that money. But it's in-towners that care about having to pay so much more for those meters.
I have to say, since I joined the trustees, 1.5 years ago, I have been just astounded by how much money and effort goes into these stupid parking meters. I mean, what bang for our buck are we getting?
Yeah, and especially, it's a bit rich
Just the man hours.
Especially if the kind of customer service we're getting is, no, you need to tell us what's wrong. It's like, I'm sorry, excuse me? But especially when you then get an upsell on the letter to the chief saying, hey, and by the way, you can purchase more stuff from us.
So Phil, can we go back and find out?
Yes.
So
What are we locked in
next
for?
month,
What are we on the hook for?
What the agreement is.
And also-
and the time limits on it.
I just want to clarify, a good clarification question from Michelle. So the company would like you have gone through and troubleshot each one. Is that a prelude to shipping them back, or you always have the option to ship them back?
We have the option to ship them back, but it was $80 per meter to get them fixed.
Yeah, right.
And I would just that's a lot of
Right.
money.
That's right.
So I thought there was gonna be a tech in the area, just swing by, take a look at them. That would be very simple, but it's just not, the customer service just is not there.
No, never was, even when we were buying them.
Exactly.
The other thing I would just ask Chief is if you're able to either check with some of the other towns that are, because there are towns comparable to us and, they all have different functions. But there are other towns that are using similar meters.
Hanover.
And, in particular Hanover that I can think of, at least locally. And if either they've gotten better customer service, or if it's the fact that they're used.
They didn't go with the, I don't believe, when we spoke to Hanover, we also spoke to Montpelier, because they just upgraded their meters,
Yeah.
same company.
They're in the number 5s.
They went with new meters, they didn't go refurbished.
And so I think if you're willing to look into what the other options are and what the satisfaction has been with the new versus the refurbished, if the customer service is better on the new, if they're easier to troubleshoot, having some of that info from local other towns instead of from the company would probably be a little more reliable for us.
Chief, are they malfunctioning more in specific parts of the village, or?
They are. A lot of it depends on, it seems anyways, and it makes sense, of course, because they're solar powered to a degree. If they're in a spot where it just does not receive as much sun as another spot, we can't keep them charged. The batteries just don't hold a charge. So for instance, in front of Soulfully Good, there is a meter that would never stay charged. I mean, we would put a fresh battery in it and the next day it'd be gone. And we even switched out the heads, tried everything. We put one of the older style mechanical meters in that spot and it has worked flawlessly. At least we're collecting revenue on that spot and it's not a vacant meter head. But that's just, that's probably the most extreme example, but it does seem that it goes, certain zones have less malfunctions than other zones because I think a lot of it has to do with how much sun it gets.
So yeah, again, that'd be a good, if Montpelier's having the same issue with that.
Sure.
So none of them are failing because of the internal battery. It's the ones that are, the batteries that are needed to be charged by
Well, it's hard to say why
working.
some go down and some don't. We just don't know. It used to be with the mechanical meters, and these are to a small degree. If there's a jam or if there's something else wrong with it, Harold or Terry could more or less tinker with it enough and get it back to running, up to speed, no problem. These are like a cell phone. It's like you trying to take your cell phone apart to figure out why it's not working. I don't know. If it's jammed in the chute, obviously we can fix that. But anytime these go down, they go blank, and we try to reset them with, they gave us the sets of these cards, which you can swipe and punch in codes and that kind of thing to try to troubleshoot. Gave us some limited instruction on that, but by and large, if you do those things and it still doesn't work, you have no way of
idea
knowing why.
Why?
Yeah. But food for thought.
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
Definitely.
And that's what I have for my report for now.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, let's move on to the village financial report.
Yes. So we're meeting our metrics. You've got July and August here, so it's early yet. We don't have a snowy winter on our hands. No surprises.
Yeah, I don't see anything jumping out.
Correct. The other thing I wanted to mention is we're all aware of the streetlight project for replacing the existing streetlights around the village green with new light fixtures and new poles. The poles have been delivered, light fixtures have been delivered, the anchor bolts have been delivered, but right now there's not enough money in the project to install them. So I'm working, Jess got some ideas to pursue.
I have 2 questions on the financial report.
Yes.
Under expenditures, the line trustees, do we know what that 2744 is?
Thanks.
It's the 4th line underneath, or the 3rd?
Third line.
Third line.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I'd say it's probably legal because you paid for some of that research that Brian did before he came.
Yeah, for what would happen today.
And then the grant expense at the bottom of that section.
The only grant expense in the village we had expenses might be through the police department.
Right, yeah, we have,
So we'll be reimbursed.
I think that's reimbursable.
Yeah, that'll come back.
So I do not see a path to having them installed before the end of foliage. I hope there's a path to have them done by early December. It'd be nice to have them up.
What's the shortfall?
About $18,000.
Yeah, hopefully we can find a path and have them done by Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah, that'd be perfect.
That'd be great. Before the ground freezes, or the path would be next spring.
That's right.
So if somebody wants a plaque in their name?
Okay, so moving along, is that it?
That's, I mean, they've got no other news other than they've been ordered, they're here, but there's no path to putting them up right now.
Okay. Where are we storing them, by the way?
They're stored in the Kelly barn.
Okay. That's nice.
At least the poles are, the lights are too.
All right. All right, moving along to old business. High Street, safety issues.
Yep, the signs that the board approved last month have been ordered and will be installed when they arrive.
Sounds good. That's great. There is one that you brought up that we talked about that isn't immediate, but it sounds like a good idea for the future, which is to put a fog lane in.
Yes, there are a couple places that I would put some paint on the pavement. One is as you coming with your back to Central Street, as you're climbing the hill and you're kind of flattening out just before we're Susan, so that there's a picket fence. There are 2 layers of stone wall there. And I would like to put a fog line to keep people more towards the center of the road rather than drift towards the edge, just to try and keep that wall from getting endangered.
Yes, and perhaps keeping a car from going over that edge there.
Yes, that's right.
But so that's something down the road.
Well,
maybe next year.
with your permission, I could get that done this fall.
I think it's a good idea. What do you folks think?
I'm not exactly sure
Yeah,
what we're talking about.
Well, maybe we should go take a look then, so you can see where that is. But it's, I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm not ready to speak to it unless I'm exactly
All
sure
right.
what we're talking about.
Very good.
We're just talking about the fog line in front of where Sudi's.
That's correct, her fence, her picket fence.
Yeah, which is in bad shape. Or maybe just bring us a photograph.
Okay, I can do
I
that.
think that would suffice to show. Okay.
Should we read this into the record?
Oh, well, no.
Okay.
Do you want to?
I was just wondering, just because you...
Well, you know, what's happened with High Street is that the residents, so everyone knows, some of the residents would like to see a number of safety issues. This board, and some of the residents want to see no changes. And we've received almost equal input. So going down the middle, in a Solomon-like way, we decided to do some of the safety changes and not do some of the safety changes, and that's where this board has stood on High Street.
Just out of curiosity, has the mobile speed monitor been posted up there ever?
It hasn't, but it certainly can be.
I mean,
It's available. It hasn't been requested, but I'm happy to put it up.
It's not one of the ones, the long list that those who want to make changes have requested. But we are putting in an advisory 15 mile per hour sign.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I just know that that's temporary, so it might be kind of a middle road, you know?
No, that's a good idea, thanks.
Well, try it. Some of the people will like it and some of them won't. Thank you for that, Patrick. Okay. So let's move along. 15 Maple Street, a request for variance.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mary and I own a house at 15 Maple Street, and we have converted it from a one-bedroom to one unit to a 2-unit rental. And with that, we have to convert or create 4 parking spaces. We have received, we've worked with Michael Brands and Phil and gone through the zoning, and we have been approved. And we gave you information on what we were approved. In talking with the neighbors, the request was to request the variance, in fact, to ask for 2 curb cuts and to create two two parking space sections rather than
And
one.
one that loops through.
Yeah, that's correct. And I could provide you much more details, but it is in going up and down Maple Street, what we're requesting really is kind of in the flavor of the neighborhood, and it's also in agreement with the abutting neighbors.
It's also nice to have more rental space in the village.
We're
Well,
trying.
I'd definitely make a motion to allow this to be, I actually think it would also look nicer than a big parking lot. It would be two separate small driveway areas, so I'd like to make a motion to allow it as presented.
Does any actual curb need to be physically cut?
There's no curb.
There's no.
I'll second that motion.
Little grass.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Great, thank you all.
And good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Sure.
All right, moving along. Village Cruiser, new business.
So this is a cruiser that was approved in the budget. I'm coming before you to request the ability to purchase it with those approved funds. I think we had $30,000 set aside in the budget for the purchase of this cruiser. Under the state contract bid, the price comes in at $28,675 for the cruiser. We will be getting rid of one of the oldest cruiser, and this is what this is going to replace, is that one. And they'll, as you know, we cycle them. Primary becomes secondary and that kind of thing. And then what I use the funds from the sale or trade-in of the other vehicle is to pay for the upfit for this car. So it costs about $3,000 to strip out the old car of lights and siren and electronics and to upfit the new car with lights and siren and electronics, which we recycle those electronics, and all the cruiser lights and everything are recycled, the radios are recycled. But you do have to pay somebody who knows what they're doing to take them out and put them back in so they still work.
Great. So that's already been approved.
It was, but I just wanted to come here.
It's in the budget.
It's a
It's in the
big,
budget, right.
yeah, it's a big purchase, so I wanted to
Yes.
come and just make sure
Yeah.
you.
It's above our pay grade, so we're bringing it to you.
Yeah, okay. So we don't need a motion, but it's been
Sounds
approved.
good.
It's okay, as long as
Thank
the
you.
minutes reflect there's no opposition, that's good.
Right. Okay, the Title 8 ordinance, adopt revisions to Title 8. Everyone has paperwork on that.
So that is, you'll see, you have a summary of the changes. And then we rescind the entire existing and adopt an entire new. And then you're not sending somebody back on page 18, paragraph 3, to swap out this word or that word.
Could you tell the audience what you're doing now?
Yeah, could you,
The summary?
yeah, do the summary for us? I'm trying
Sure.
to find I read it, but now I can't find the sheet to read it.
I'll bring it back to you, Joe. Okay, this is... Okay, so, and I'll just read them, it'll take just a few minutes, folks watching at home. So it lengthens the parking stay in front of the post office to 15 minutes. No, this is one that we had done, but it was procedurally this corrects it. And the $1 per hour to park throughout the village. We now have appendices A through M, and the ordinance references appendices A through L. So, on 8221, section D was deleted in 2013, and then it was, so this gets it into the history within the ordinance stating that it happened in 2013. There was a while that the history said it happened in 2016, which was wrong. On 8265, So last month, the board liked the idea of having High Street be a 16,000 pound street. So the standard street weight limit in Vermont is 24,000. The trustees are allowed to reduce to 16, but not any lower. So High Street joins River Street and Mountain Avenue as a 16,000 pound street. So it's an ordinance change to reflect the vote and the signs that will be going up. The 8223M, that authorizes the trustees to enact by resolution parking rules and regs. And 8337 is being deleted because it's actually a duplicate of 8336 with a couple minor changes. And this ordinance, if adopted tonight by the trustees, will become effective on November 10th. And then, as in with all ordinances adopted by the trustees or the select board, they're subject to citizen action. So if a group of concerned citizens said, no, this isn't right, you can get up a petition for a vote to not allow it to go into effect. So it's always an option. And that's what the last paragraph is.
And you need a motion to approve, right?
Yes.
I'd make a motion to approve.
A second.
Any
And to
further,
sign a signature page.
yeah,
Goes
I
without
have
saying.
that.
I have a further comment.
yeah, further comments, yeah.
Is this something we should potentially table until we find out how long we have to keep the digital meters for?
I wouldn't think so.
No,
Because then that might
Yeah,
affect
yeah.
what the charging rate for the meters is.
You can
we
always,
You
could,
can always change it.
so regardless of, say if you tabled it tonight, and next month you want it to go $2, you're still 60 days out from being $2. You will
Right.
make the change next month.
There's a lag time.
Right, but then it would still go in effect because then the change to the change would be a lag time.
Always 60 days when you adopt
Right.
an ordinance to go into effect.
So we could stop it right before 60 days from now?
Stop, I'm not sure.
Stop it from going into effect.
No, once you adopt the ordinance, the wheels are on the,
But
staying on the train.
that being my point, and if I'm incorrect, let me know.
Okay.
But we're gonna try to find out if we have to keep the digital meters and how long that contract lasted for. I'm assuming potentially that we would not be keeping the price at the
No.
increased rate if we went back to the mechanical meters.
I don't think you need to make any assumption about that, and we don't have to make any decision about that in order
Yeah.
to prove this revision of ordinance. It's simply not going to impede any decision in the future of the nature you're talking about.
Okay, I'm still confused, but that's.
But what they're saying, Carrie, is that even if we decide at some point later, it would still be 60 days from that decision for that change to be made.
Right, if we tried to change it back.
Right, if we tried to change it in any way, one way or the other.
Whatever you want to do, it's going to be 60 days.
But can be done,
It can be done.
can be done.
Okay.
So any other discussion on the summary, the revisions as presented? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, moving on, Investment Advisory Group update. And everyone should have received a copy of that update. And we have Jill Davies and Patrick Proctor here to explain the proposal to us.
So first I want to introduce Patrick to you. We have two new members of the Investment Advisory Committee, Patrick Proctor and Mark Hall, who lives in the village. So we've come to you tonight with a proposal to change the allocations of the fund. So when we made these changes originally, we put quite a lot of money into the equity fund. There's there's quite a lot of talk right now about how there may be a market correction. And if you were saving for your pension sometime in the future, you wouldn't worry about it because it would recover. But we may be in the position that we actually want to take some money out of this fund next year, if given all the work that we're doing. So given that, we feel like it's more prudent to put a higher percentage of what we have into bonds. So that's what this proposal is to do.
And I think just to follow up on that, I think the even the original, regardless whether we were to withdraw money next year or not, the original allocation was a really dominant on the stock market side of things, which it was an 80%, 20%. And part of it is that we've seen so much growth on the stock market side that part of this is also just kind of rebalancing it and taking some of that profit and putting it into a more conservative investment. So it's also that the value of the fund has grown so much that because of the great performance of the stock market, that this is kind of a logical way to take some of the money off the table but still keep it invested.
So it'd be 60, more like 60-40?
Exactly.
If you take away the Vermont Community Loan Fund, it turns out it's 60-40.
Have you already presented this to the select board?
No, we'll do that next week. So we need your approval and their approval.
In committee, I sit on this representing us. I actually was in favor of taking more, $500,000 out of equity.
Is there a reason we're not taking more?
Well, because Patrick and Mark, we're in particular, I think we're strongly in favor of a smaller amount.
That was kind of a different issue. That was a discussion about taking something to cash, which actually the money has to stay invested as long as it's in the fund, correct?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't just cash. I thought we were going to do a higher number, but just saying.
Would it be unusual to have my understanding is that 60-40 is fairly typical.
60-40 is very conservative, and so we're feeling that we should be conservative at the moment with the town's money.
And I'm okay with it. I'm just saying in committee there was some discussion.
You want to be hyper-conservative. I know that.
Well, so what happened in committee was that there was discussion of potentially doing more profit taking with the incentive of actually withdrawing money in the future. And so part of the incentive for the profit taking would be that it would kind of put money aside for withdrawal. And that's, I'm not going to speak for Mark, but that was there was kind of I would say a discussion in committee about whether it made more sense to keep more capital in the fund or to withdraw capital for civic use. And so the recommendation on that has yet to be decided, and we're still talking about that. But this was kind of a nice compromise, I would say, that everybody felt like was a.
And everybody, including myself, agreed to that presentation for tonight.
So Jeff, you wanted 40-60 instead of 60-40?
No, he wanted to take even more out of the equity fund now. So the thought is that the stock market may well fall in future, in the next few months, next 6 months. We don't know, and so that the thought was to maybe put even more into bonds. That would be extremely, extremely conservative.
So the presentation is as it stands, and a recommendation by the committee.
So I'd make a motion to adopt the recommendation and approve the change.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion or questions from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and thank you.
Thank you guys for your hard work.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Yeah, appreciate it.
Just under other business, under additions, there was one addition we haven't hit yet. We hit it's the elementary school parade.
Trans sign.
And the signage, transportation sign.
Right. So the proposal is for the state of Vermont to come in and add a sign on that tree at Tribal Park, pointing people to the Marsh Billings National Historic Park.
And that'd be above the suicide six?
That's correct, on top of the tree. Whether it was above Suicide 6 or below Suicide 6, it would be grouped with the sign to Suicide 6.
Place where no out-of-stater ever uses the turn signal?
I haven't been watching.
It's awesome when people use their turn signal over there.
It's awesome when people use their turn signal over there.
Yeah, I mean, you can.
It allows you to know you can actually go out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
There are a lot of reasons it's useful.
Yeah.
It's good for pedestrians to know too.
So they've added these signs all the way from the interstate, but this is not a state highway, and they need village permission to install that
Do
sign.
we need a motion for that, or just?
If there's no objection, I can tell them, go ahead and put it up.
There's no objection.
I have no objection.
I think it's a lovely thing to do to help people out,
so.
to where to go. And, I mean, that in a good way.
And please use your turn signal.
Yeah, and use your turn signal. I need to remember that.
Well, that's interesting, Ward, because it's Pleasant Street and all the way down, front of Max, and it
Phil, you're
stays
killing me.
Pleasant Street all the way to Elm Street. So does that person need a turn signal?
courteous.
Or does the person? It's
No, the person going to Central
it's about
Street needs
etiquette.
a turn signal, actually.
Let's not go down that road.
It's definitely about etiquette.
Yes.
It's, yeah, to let people know.
The number 4 stays on Central Street.
Route 4 goes all, yeah, if you stay on Route 4,
Stay
you're
with
not
your-
using your turn signal to stay on Route 4.
Stay with your 4.
The elementary school parade, we already did that.
Yes,
We did that.
Okay.
I think we're
So
motion to
we are at the point
minutes?
where we could approve minutes. So are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the August
I didn't
14th
see any.
meeting? Or I was not present, so
I make a motion to accept the minutes from August 14th of 2018.
Seconded.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And entertain a motion for adjournment followed by silent.
I make a motion.
Wait, no, I think
Okay.
before we adjourn to sign expense warrants, I think we should put into the record who was doing expense warrants when.
I'm doing them in October.
Who's doing them in September?
Can't remember. Beth, do you have that?
There's nobody doing them in September. There's nobody signed up.
I can sign up.
But what's the order? We have a existing order.
Your existing order would put Mr. Khan in that spot.
For September?
Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
All right, I'll take on September.
Okay.
So what's left of it, absolutely. Is that okay, Carrie?
It's only the 11th.
That's perfect for me.
Yeah, I did it.
All right, so I'll
You owe
I'll do it
$3 to
tomorrow
$5.
morning. I'll be here tomorrow morning.
The checks, it won't be ready until probably on Wednesday. Give them until Thursday afternoon. He has no server, so they can- We're gonna try something new
Yeah, all right, so,
with these, if that's okay.
Great, so I would like to make a
What does that
motion
mean?
to adjourn.
I make, yes.
Seconded.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Macy.
Thank you, Macy.